Welcome to Just a Cup on Believe. I am Brian Fetzer. This is an organic conversation with some of the world's greatest athletes and the individuals that help get them to that point in time. And I am so fortunate to have with me two-time Olympian in track and field, 400 hurdles, 400 relays from GB, Great Britain, Jack Green. Jack, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to have a chat with you and talk a little bit about, everything. We were just catching up before, and we first, met up when I was coaching at Harvard and trying to convince you to leave the UK and come run for me at Harvard, which is hilarious and great in the same time.
Yeah, and that's what 14 years ago. And yeah, I was talking about that the other day with someone actually. It's like even Harvard has said something to me. It's like, Brian, you didn't see my academics.
Hey, you know what? I was looking at how good I thought you were going to be, and I think I figured out pretty good. You make two Olympic teams, and you win a medal in the World Championships on a relay. I think you probably could have helped us out back then for sure. But speaking of the Olympics, being an Olympian, former Olympian, and we're just finishing up with the Olympics. Paralympics are going on right now. There's such a buildup for the Olympics, and then it's finished. What is that emotional roller coaster like?
I've talked about this quite a lot, Brian, in terms of it's falling off a cliff. Because everything's about that moment, that one, maybe two moments, depending if you get a few opportunities, right? If you're doing a few events or you've got heat, semi-final, whatever it is. But it's also the build-up beforehand. So beforehand, I'm going into a training camp, which is 4 weeks, and you're looked after and you've got everyone there. You've got all these things before for the whole year where every single motivation in a training session might be hardest because it's the Olympics. You have all this big build-up, people are excited about it, pretty much the only time outside of a major championships that anyone really cares in that 4 years. You go to that championships and then you just leave. And it's highly emotional. Whether you've done well or you've done poorly, it's emotional, right? And if you, for example, 2012, British athlete, I was 20 years old, my first Olympics. The day after my 4x400 meter final, where we finished fourth and missed a medal by 0.13 of a second, I got on a train that took 40 minutes to take me home, and I was just back to normal life. And yeah, that's a really hard thing to take. There's no kind of like aftercare, and that might have changed now. That might be better now in some cases, but yeah, no aftercare. It's just great. See you next year. And that's a hard thing to take. As I said, it's emotional, regardless, positive or negative, and there's things you have to deal with, but typically alone or within your support group that you've got.
You think about it, the cameras are on you. You're going in and out of the village. You're especially if you're at the home country, you're the host country. All eyes. You had Sky Sports, and you probably had all the paparazzi, all the tabloids of England. And then it is kind of back to normalcy. The Olympics are it's the only true global event. You have the World Cups and so forth, but those are just for a very small portion of individuals and only for a select number of countries, where the Olympics it's everybody. And you have such a wide range of talent that's there. It'd be a tough thing mentally to go back for, because you're probably not going to compete in an event similar to that ever again.
Never.
Yeah, if you're a footballer or a soccer player and you play in the Champions League, you can do that every single year potentially with a team. You're Man City. You're playing in it every single year. But as an Olympian, it's once every 4 years, and the second one's never guaranteed.
That's the thing, to be a double Olympian, triple Olympian, whatever, like the longevity you have to have. And that's not just from a physical point of view, but from an emotional and mental point of view, like staying in the game, and then financial as well, because you're not making money. Yeah, there's a few of us that do. I wasn't one of them, but the majority are part-time working or on very minimal minimal money. So then you're also like, how do I financially stay in the game for a long time? So there's so many stressors. So it's never guaranteed. There can be some luck in there. That might not be the right timing for you. I've got friends that have been to Commonwealths, Europeans, and Worlds, but never an Olympics, and they're fantastic athletes, but it just didn't work out that year. But then also on that post-Olympics piece, you've completely changed for life. You're now an Olympian, right? So you do have to deal with that in some way. And your identity is tied up in that, but not just from an internal point of view. Some people are better at dealing with this than others, but externally you are now the runner, the Olympian. So everywhere you go, when you're asked, what do you do, whatever, right? That's the thing that's of importance, not anything else. And that's where I think that can be quite tough. In 2012, I fell in the hurdles and then fourth in the relay, even though I was one of the best athletes in the world at a very young age and should have been going on to this and that. I couldn't handle that. My identity was that perceived as a failure. And the fact that when I'd be out in public with friends and things, and people would be like, oh, aren't you the guy who fell at the Olympics? Like, that was what I was known for, rather than I made an Olympic Games and was sixth in the world at the age of 20, right? So for young people, which pretty much all of our athletes are,
right,
we need a lot of support there. And there's transitions in everything. I think you said it earlier. There's transitions all the time in life and in sport, but an Olympics is a pinnacle and a jump off the cliff that, if we don't have that support in place, can be really tough for people.
And you think about now with social media, I mean, 14 years ago, it was getting big, but now it is almost everything. I mean, as an athlete, most athletes now are on social media at a very large rate because of the fact that they don't make a lot of money, and that's kind of their platform for influencer and endorsements. I mean, I couldn't imagine what that would have been like for you back then in the realm of TikTok and Instagram and instant gratification media now.
But it was still big then. In that London Olympics, I got 30,000 followers on Twitter just from that games. And I had like 7,000 before, right? But with that, I was also, because I fell in the hurdles, was getting a ton of abuse come through, which I was very attached at that point to the material, the kind of the grandeur, everything, just being this person, being known and so on. That really hurt me. It's a bit different now, not needing as much of that validation as we grow and we develop, of course. But as a 20-year-old at home games who 2 years before was World Juniors and then suddenly I'm at Olympics and can actually go and do something good, that was a really hard thing to take. But yeah, I've not actually talked about that much. Usually it doesn't come up too much, but it's an important thing that was then when this was quite new.
Yeah.
Now, look at it now. I think I saw things like people gaining like 1 million followers overnight, right? When they won Olympic gold.
The U.S. rugby player, Alona Mar, sorry. She gained like 2 million followers during the games. Now, she's got some great content, and she does a great job of championing body awareness for herself, because she's a rugby player. She's not a little runway model, and she's done a great job of embracing who she is and capitalizing on it. But she had a lot of success too. You see the ones that fail or don't live up to the expectations that they might, and it might be the person of their country. I mean, hey, there's certain countries that they have a guy or a girl who everything's riding on. I mean, St. Lucia, Julian, the young lady that won the 100 meters, first Olympic medal in their country's history. I mean, she's a rock star. Now, the next time she competes, if she doesn't live up to that, what's it going to be like? And that's tough.
These are all the skills we have to teach, though, right? Because this happens. This is actually normal within sport and within performance environments. And yet we still, I believe, neglect those sides of things, as seeing it as almost natural that, well, you can either deal with that or you can't, or you're mentally strong or you're not. when actually this can be trained and managed and developed in the same way that the physical can.
Oh, absolutely.
But we still neglect it.
Well, back in 2012, I mean, it was pretty well documented. Your personal, I'll call it your personal demons that kind of came about with depression, post that. Can you just share a little bit about how it came about and what happened with it?
Yeah. So I got to the top pretty quick, as you all know, Brian, from following my career. And I come from a single parent family, working class, down in a certain part of southern England where not much happens. But sport was my opportunity, running was my opportunity to become something. But I had such a brutal mindset of all or nothing, horrible to myself all the time. The expectations were so high, and that actually got me to the top really, really quick. And I outworked anyone, and I was an animal. Like, I had nicknames like Green Machine because I was like a machine, a robot. 2 hearts, 4 lungs because I just didn't stop. But actually, that was all mental more than anything. Yes, there's physical parts I've been blessed with, but mental more than anything. But it was living at this intensity that wasn't sustainable. And my first year pro, when I was 19, because Nike signed me, which is why I didn't come out to America in any form. Nike knocked on the door and said, any chance? So obviously, as a young kid, I was very excited about that. And my first year, I went from 106th in the world to 16th, around 48.9 as a 19-year-old, right? And was like, cool, I'm on to great and wonderful things, went to a world champs. And then I demanded even more of myself because it was a home Olympics. But I became hugely inconsistent because I was living in this world where I just had to be perfect. I had to be great, but not just on the track, but off the track as well. So there was no time for rest. There was no time for recovery. And I was so horrible to myself in that. And I ran 48.6 that year, 6th in the world, 20 years old, great, doing amazing things. But I fell at Olympics in front of 80,000 people, millions watching at home, because I was so full of fear, because I had so much expectation internally that when I then put myself in a position to realize those expectations, I just froze. I couldn't do it. So I got to the 3rd hurdle and I fell. Right, I just messed up my stride pattern because I wasn't there present. I was just so worried about other people's expectations, opinions. What happens if I don't go and make this final, or don't go and win the Olympics, whatever it might be. And that kind of then just unraveled everything. I've always struggled because of this mindset I'd had and this perfectionism side. When I was a kid, I always struggled with anxiety and various things. But because I was successful, it was always kind of papered over. Like, well, Jack goes and wins things still, so he can't be struggling. When the reality was, I was struggling, but I would just go and perform still. I used to hate competing because of the amount of pressure I put on myself. And yeah, it was shortly after 2012 where, I was diagnosed with mental health disorders and was considered a threat to my own life at that point. And yet I was voted the most talented sports person in Britain, and most likely to go on to Rio and go win a medal or win the Olympics. And quite frankly, I think with my ability, I think that's correct. There's things I can still do now, 4 or 5 years retired, that there's pro athletes right now who can't run as fast. Like, I know. And yet I can turn up and do it. They've got something that's different about me. But mentally, I could not sustain the level that was needed. And I didn't have the support to help me manage and change that, but also just manage my environment. So yeah, that's the kind of spiel. And I ended up having 2 years out from the sport at 21 years old, just out of the sport completely before I returned. And yeah, did some good stuff, but there's definitely a part of me, not a regret, but I know that I didn't do what I could have, and I'm responsible for a lot of that, but I'm also disappointed by the setup and the support that I didn't have.